The morning light fell across Lexington, Virginia like a promise nobody had made. Clean, quiet. The kind of town where people still said good morning to strangers and meant it. Where the Blue Ridge Mountains rose in the distance like the spine of something ancient and unmoved. Where history pressed into the present through limestone buildings and Civil War monuments and streets that remembered when horses outnumbered cars. Thea Carver stood at the edge of a narrow back lane, her shadow long against the worn cobblestones. 34 years old, 5'8", lean in the way that comes from missing meals not by choice, but by circumstance. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back tight military regulation, even though she had no regulation to follow anymore. Her eyes were gray-blue, the color of winter sky before snow. They held the kind of distance that comes from seeing too much, and the kind of steadiness that comes from refusing to look away. She wore faded jeans and a Navy-issue jacket that had seen better deployments. The left shoulder still bore the outline where her unit patch used to be. She had removed it herself, carefully, with a seam ripper, because she could not bear to look at it anymore. Beside her stood Bishop, 7 years old, German shepherd. Black and tan coat, thick and well kept, despite everything else falling apart. His ears were up, alert. His brown eyes tracked movement Thea could not see. A bird 3 blocks away. A door closing. The world in layers of sound and scent that humans missed entirely. Bishop wore a tactical collar, worn but maintained. A metal tag caught the light when he moved. It read simply MWDK9, Military Working Dog. No name, no number. Those records were sealed, classified. Because Bishop had served in places the government did not officially acknowledge and done things the government did not officially discuss. Thea adjusted the strap of her duffel bag. Olive green canvas, military surplus. Everything she owned fit inside. 3 changes of clothes, a field jacket, a Leatherman multi-tool, a Ziploc bag containing discharge papers, and a DD-214 that said, honorable but felt like anything but. A photograph she could not bring herself to look at but could not bring herself to throw away. And at the very bottom, wrapped in an old t-shirt, a bottle of pills she had not opened in 3 days. 72 hours. The longest stretch since leaving the VA hospital in Richmond. She had been walking since dawn. Bishop beside her the whole way. Through the waking streets of Lexington. Past coffee shops opening. Past the Washington and Lee campus where young people walked with backpacks and futures. Past houses with porch swings and flower boxes and lives that seemed intact. Thea did not fit here. She knew it the way you know a bone is broken before the X-ray confirms it. This town was for people who had not lost everything. For people who still believed in second chances. For people who could sleep through the night without waking to the sound of something that was not there. But she had nowhere else to go. The Veterans Affairs Office in Richmond had given her a list. Transitional housing, job placement programs, support groups. She had attended one meeting, sat in a circle of folding chairs in a church basement, listened to people share. When it was her turn, she stood up and walked out. Because the words they wanted her to say were locked behind something she did not have the key to open. Bishop had followed her. Of course he had. Bishop always followed. They had been together for 4 years. Partnered in Kandahar. Thea as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist. Bishop as the detector. The nose. The early warning system that stood between soldiers and the things buried in the ground, meant to erase them. They had cleared routes, swept compounds, found devices hidden in walls and under roads and inside dead animals left by the side of the highway. 247 confirmed fines. Thea kept count. The Navy kept count. Bishop just worked. And then came the day that ended everything. Route clearance mission. October 2022. Outside Kandahar. Thea's team. 5 soldiers. Bishop. Standard sweep. They had done it 100 times before, but this time the device was not where it should have been. It was not in the ground. It was not in a culvert. It was inside the overturned truck they were sent to investigate. Wired to collapse. Command detonated. Waiting for someone to get close enough. Bishop alerted. Sat. Refused to move closer. The signal was clear. But Thea's team leader overruled it. Said the dog was wrong. Said they were wasting time. Said clear it and move on. Thea argued. The only time she had ever argued on a mission. Insisted they pull back. Call EOD protocol. Wait for verification. Her team leader told her to stand down. Ordered her to stay with the vehicle. Took the rest of the team forward. Thea watched them approach the truck. Watched them reach the door. Watched Bishop strain against her grip, whining every instinct, screaming wrong, wrong, wrong. And then the world became fire and noise and the smell of burning fuel and things that used to be people. Thea woke up in a field hospital. Concussion. Shrapnel wounds. Hearing loss in her left ear. Bishop curled beside the cot, unauthorized but unchallenged. Alive. 4 soldiers were not. The official report called it enemy action. Commended Thea for attempting to prevent the loss. Noted that proper EOD protocols had not been followed. Cleared her of wrongdoing. Cleared her of everything except the weight. She carried their names, memorized them, said them in the dark when sleep would not come. Sergeant Marcus Webb, 29. 2 kids. Corporal David Lynn, 23. Engaged. Private First Class Jordan Hayes, 21. First deployment. Specialist Amanda Cross, 26. Sister to 3 brothers. And Lieutenant Brandon Shaw, 32. The one who ordered them forward. The one who did not listen. The one who died anyway. Thea had been medically retired. PTSD, major depressive disorder. Insomnia. Survivor's guilt. Words that looked clean on paper but felt like broken glass in her chest. Bishop had been retired with her. Transferred to her custody because military working dogs who served in combat were supposed to be adopted by their handlers if possible. Because Bishop would not work with anyone else anyway. They had been drifting for 18 months. Couch surfing. Sleeping in her truck until it broke down. Odd jobs she could not keep because the flashbacks came at random. And the panic attacks left her shaking in bathroom stalls trying to remember how to breathe. She had called her parents once, from a gas station in Kentucky. Her mother answered. Thea could hear the hope in her voice, the careful tone of someone trying not to say the wrong thing. Thea told her she was fine, told her not to worry, told her she would call again soon. She had not called again, because fine was a lie, and worry was inevitable and soon never came. 3 days ago, she had been in Richmond, down to $17, sleeping behind a Goodwill. Bishop beside her. Rain coming. She walked past a real estate office, saw a flyer in the window. Handwritten, almost a joke. Historic property for sale, Lexington, VA, as is. $1. Thea stopped. Read it again. Assumed it was a scam. or a typo, or some kind of performance art. But she had nothing to lose except $1. And she had that. She went inside. The office was small, smelled like old carpet and instant coffee. A woman in her 60s sat behind a desk covered in paper. Thea asked about the listing. The woman looked up, adjusted her glasses, said it was real, explained the property had been abandoned for decades, owned by the town now. They were trying to clear inventory, revitalize the historic district. The building was structurally sound but needed work, significant work. And there was a clause. Thea asked what clause. The woman pulled out a file. Read from it. Said the buyer must establish a viable business within 90 days, or the property would revert to town ownership and be sold at auction. Thea asked why. The woman shrugged. Said it was meant to prevent speculation, to ensure the building was actually used, that someone actually cared. Thea stared at the paper, thought about 90 days, thought about viable business, thought about the fact that she could not hold down a job at McDonald's, but somehow the universe was offering her a building for $1. She asked if she could see it. The woman gave her an address, a key. Said the town would process the paperwork if she decided to buy. Said most people looked once and walked away. Thea thanked her, left, got on a Greyhound with Bishop, used 13 of her remaining dollars, arrived in Lexington at dawn, and now she stood here, looking at the building, trying to decide if this was an opportunity or just a different kind of trap. The structure was small, one story, built from limestone blocks the color of old bone. The walls were thick, solid, stained with age and weather. Moss crept along the foundation, where water had run for decades. The wooden door was heavy, slightly warped, dark with time. A single window faced south, catching morning light through glass, so dirty it looked frosted. Above the door, carved into a limestone lintel, were letters worn almost smooth. She could barely make them out. A.M. Candle Works, established 1930. A candle maker's shop, abandoned, forgotten. Thea walked closer. Bishop stayed beside her, his gait easy but his attention sharp. He was trained to clear buildings, to detect threats. Old habits did not fade just because you took off the uniform. She reached the door, tested the handle, locked. She pulled out the key the real estate woman had given her, slid it into the old lock, felt resistance, rust or time or both. She applied pressure. The mechanism turned with a grinding sound that echoed down the empty lane. The door did not open. She pushed. Nothing. The wood had swollen in the frame, sealed by years of humidity and neglect. Thea stepped back, assessed. The door opened inward. The hinges were on the inside. She would need leverage. She set her duffel down, positioned herself, put her shoulder against the wood where it met the frame, braced her feet. Bishop watched, did not help, could not help, just observed with the patience of something that understood effort. Thea pushed. Her boots scraped against stone, the muscles in her legs and back engaged. The door groaned but held. She stopped, breathed, pushed again, harder, focusing everything into that single point of contact. The frame cracked. The door shifted. An inch, then 2. Thea did not stop, kept the pressure constant. The door scraped inward across a floor it had not touched in decades. Dust fell from the top edge. Light spilled into darkness, and from inside came a sound. Thea froze. Not loud, not clear, just a faint scrape, like something shifting against stone or wood settling after years of stillness. Bishop's ears snapped forward. His body went still in the way that meant alert, watching, waiting for the signal to act. Thea's training kicked in before thought did. Shoulders back, weight centered, eyes scanning. In the field, small sounds meant big consequences. That reflex never left. She listened. The sound did not repeat. But the silence that followed was not empty. It was the silence of something holding its breath. Thea pushed the door wider, enough for light to cut a narrow beam through the interior. She leaned slightly. Let her eyes adjust. Did not enter. Not yet. Clear the space before entering. Always. Bishop pressed against her leg. Close. Ready. Thea spoke quietly. Stay close. She stepped inside. The air hit her first. Dry. Stale. But underneath something else. Faint and sweet. Beeswax. Not strong. Not fresh. But lingering. As if the walls themselves had absorbed it over decades and refused to let go. The room was larger than it looked from outside. The ceiling was low. Wooden beams darkened with age. The walls were limestone, uneven. Patches of green moss traced the lower edges where moisture had crept in. The floor was flagstone, each piece slightly different in color and texture, fitted together with precision that spoke of craftsmanship and time. Dust coated everything, thick in some places, disturbed in others. Thea noticed that immediately. Disturbed, not untouched. Something had moved through here. Her gaze shifted to the center of the room. There it was, a massive cast iron vat, blackened with age, sitting on a solid stone base that looked older than everything around it. Even from a distance, it felt like the anchor of the entire structure, the one thing that had not moved in decades. Bishop walked straight toward it. No hesitation, no distraction, a direct line, as if he had already decided where he needed to be. Thea followed, slower. Her boots echoed softly against the stone. She scanned the corners as she moved. Old wooden shelves lined one wall. Rusted hooks hung from the beams. Metal molds were stacked unevenly against another wall. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. So what had made that sound? Bishop reached the vat and circled it once, nose low, inhaling deeply. Processing information in a language Thea could not speak but had learned to trust. He stopped on one side, sat down, not casually, intentionally, body upright, alert, like a sentry taking position. Thea frowned. That your spot? Bishop did not respond, did not move, just held his position with the focus of something on duty. Thea crouched beside the vat, ran her fingers along the edge. Cold, solid, heavy. She tapped it lightly with her knuckle. The sound echoed dull and thick, exactly what you would expect from iron that had been sitting still for decades. She shifted her attention downward, to the stone base, and stopped. There was a difference. Subtle. Almost nothing. But not nothing. The slab beneath the vat was a slightly different shade of gray than the surrounding floor. Warmer in tone. And the lines where it met the other stones were cleaner, more defined. Like it had been placed there later, or sealed more carefully than the rest. Thea leaned closer, traced the edge with her finger. The mortar line was tighter, smoother, intentional. She sat back on her heels, thinking. Logic first. The building was real. The structure was solid. The materials alone were worth more than $1. That already made no sense. But now this. A hidden slab under the heaviest object in the room. That was not neglect. That was design. Thea stood, stepped back, scanned the room again. Faster now. Sharper. The walls, the floor, the window. Every angle, every line. If someone had hidden something here, they had done it deliberately. And if it had stayed hidden this long, then either no one had looked or no one had understood what they were looking at. She looked at Bishop. Bishop was still watching the same spot, unmoving. "Yeah," Thea said quietly. "I see it too." For the first time since leaving Richmond, Thea felt something shift inside her that was not just survival, not comfort, not peace, but something sharper, clearer, purpose. She walked back outside. The sunlight made her squint. The quiet lane stretched in both directions, empty, calm, indifferent. She reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, opened it. Inside was a single dollar bill. Crumpled. Soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. She stared at it for a long moment. This was not about a bargain. This was about a foothold, a base, a place to stand still long enough to figure out what came next. Thea turned back toward the building. Bishop was already inside, unmoving, holding his position beside the vat, like a soldier who had been given an order. She stepped through the doorway. The wood creaked softly behind her. "All right," she said under her breath. "We do this right." She did not rush. She did not force anything. That was not how you handled something unknown. First, you secure the perimeter. Then you observe. Then when you are ready, you move. Thea grabbed an old piece of wood from the corner, tested its weight. Not a weapon, just a tool. She returned to the vat, stood beside Bishop. Her hand rested on the cold iron. Then, slowly, deliberately, she shifted her grip, testing, measuring, preparing. Bishop leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on the base beneath the vat. Thea took a breath, and for the first time since she left the war behind, she felt like she was stepping into something, instead of running away from it. But just as she began to apply force there, it was again, that sound, this time clearer. Not from the door, not from the walls, from beneath the vat. Thea froze. Bishop stood instantly, and whatever was hidden down there, it was not as silent as it should have been. Thea did not move the vat that day. She left it exactly where it was, went back outside, sat on the stone step with Bishop beside her, thought about what she had heard and what it might mean and whether she was ready to find out. The afternoon passed slowly. The sun tracked across the sky. Shadows lengthened. People walked past the end of the lane, but none turned down it. This was a forgotten place, tucked away, easy to miss. Thea ate a granola bar she found at the bottom of her duffel, gave half to Bishop, drank water from a bottle she refilled at a gas station, tried not to think about the fact that she now owned a building, but had no food and no plan, and 89 days left before she lost it. She thought about the clause, maintain a viable business. What did that even mean? Revenue customers, proof of operation. She had no money to start a business, no skills except defusing bombs and keeping dogs alive, no contacts, no network, no safety net. Just a building, a dog, and a secret under a cast iron vat. As the sun began to set, Thea stood, brushed off her jeans, looked at Bishop. "We staying?" Bishop looked back at her, steady, calm. The answer was obvious. They went inside. Thea found a corner near the wall, laid her duffel down as a pillow, kept her boots on. Old habit. Always ready to move. Bishop lay a few feet away, but not at rest. His body angled toward the center of the room, toward the vat, like a sentinel who had already chosen what needed guarding. Thea closed her eyes, did not expect to sleep. She never did anymore, just waited for morning in that gray space between waking and the dreams she could not escape. But the building was quiet. The air was still. And for the first time in 18 months, Thea was not outside, not exposed, not waiting for something to go wrong. She did not sleep deeply, but she slept. Morning came with pale gold light slipping through the south-facing window, cutting across the dust-filled air in long, quiet beams. Thea opened her eyes before the light reached her. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the smell hit her again. Faint beeswax, old stone, something preserved. She sat up slowly, rubbed the back of her neck. Her muscles were stiff from the cold floor, but she had slept worse, much worse. Bishop was already awake, not moving, just watching, still focused, still locked on that exact point. "Didn't even try to sleep, huh?" Thea muttered. Bishop's ears flicked, but his gaze did not shift. Thea followed that line again, to the vat. She thought about repetition. In the field, one strange noise could be dismissed. Two, maybe coincidence. But patterns meant intent. Bishop had not left that spot since yesterday. That was not random. That was a signal. Thea stood, stretched her shoulders, walked slowly toward the center of the room. The sunlight now illuminated more of the floor, revealed subtle differences in the stonework she had missed before. The flagstones surrounding the vat were uneven, worn naturally over time, but the slab beneath the vat remained smoother, less weathered, protected. "All right," Thea said quietly. "Let's assume this is not nothing." Bishop stood the moment she spoke, stepped closer, nose hovering just inches above the stone. Then suddenly he began to dig, not wildly, controlled, focused. His paws scraped at the edge of the slab, claws tapping sharply against the stone surface. Thea did not stop him this time. Instead, she watched. The scraping revealed a thin line, barely visible unless you were looking for it. A seam. Bishop stopped digging, looked up at her, breathing steady, waiting. Thea exhaled slowly. "Yeah," she said. "That's not natural." She ran her fingers along the seam again, pressed lightly. No movement. But the line was there, clean, too clean for something that had been untouched for decades. She stood, scanned the room, searching for something, anything that could help her leverage the slab. Her eyes landed on a rusted iron hook hanging from the wall, part of an old dipping setup. She pulled it free with a firm tug. It resisted at first, then came loose with a metallic snap that echoed through the room. Bishop flinched slightly, then immediately returned his focus to the slab. Thea stepped back to the vat, positioned the hook under the edge of the seam, tested the angle. Nothing. She adjusted, tried again. A faint shift. Not much, but enough. She paused, listened. Silence. Too much silence. She applied more pressure. This time the hook slid deeper, wedging under the stone. Thea braced her foot against the base, tightened her grip. Muscles flexed under the fabric of her jacket. Veins rose along her forearms as she pulled. The slab moved, just a fraction, but it moved. Bishop stepped back slightly, tail low, ears forward, every instinct telling him something was about to change. Thea stopped again, listened. That's when she heard it. Not imagination, not memory. A sound, soft, irregular, like something brushing against stone from underneath. Thea's grip tightened instinctively. Her breath slowed, her body shifting into that familiar edge between action and restraint. Not possible, she whispered. Bishop let out a low, controlled growl. Thea leaned closer to the slab, her ear almost touching the stone. The sound came again, slightly clearer this time. A scrape. Then silence. She pulled back, her mind racing. Not in panic, in calculation. The structure made no sense for anything living to be down there. The space would be sealed. No airflow, no entry. Unless it had not always been sealed. Thea looked around the room again. Faster now. Sharper. The walls. The floor. The window. Every angle. Every line. Then her eyes stopped. The back wall. There. A faint discoloration near the base, a patch of stone that did not match the others. Subtle. Easy to miss. Thea stood slowly. Stepped away from the slab. Bishop followed immediately, staying close, watching both Thea and the vat, uncertain which mattered more. Thea walked toward the back wall, each step deliberate. She crouched, ran her hand along the stone. Dust, rough texture, then smooth. A narrow gap between two stones. Ventilation. An old passage. Thea glanced back at the vat, then at Bishop. Someone didn't want this completely sealed, she said quietly. Bishop's ears twitched. Thea returned to the slab, this time with a different understanding. Not just a hidden compartment, a system, designed, built with purpose. She set the hook again, deeper this time. Bishop stepped back further now, body tense. Thea inhaled slowly. All right, she murmured. No more guessing. She pulled. The slab shifted again, this time wider. A thin gap opened. Darkness beneath. And from that darkness, a sudden sharp movement. Thea jerked back instantly, releasing the hook. The slab slammed back into place with a heavy thud. Bishop barked once, loud, sharp, breaking the silence completely. Thea's heart was pounding now, not from fear, from certainty. There was something down there, not just something hidden, something active. She stared at the slab, unmoving. Bishop stood beside her, no longer calm, no longer still. Both of them knew the same thing now. Whatever was under that vat, it was not waiting to be found. It was already awake. Thea did not touch the slab again for several minutes after it slammed shut. Her breathing steadied, but her mind did not. The sound, the movement, it had been real, not imagined, not memory bleeding into the present. Something had shifted under that stone, and for a woman trained to read patterns in chaos that changed everything. Bishop stood close, no longer calm. His body angled defensively, eyes locked on the vat, as if expecting it to move again. We don't rush this, Thea said quietly, more to herself than to the dog. She stepped back, forcing distance between herself and the center of the room. Years in the field had taught her that unknown spaces were not solved with force, but with patience. Observe, control, then act. She moved toward the doorway, let fresh air clear her head, sunlight washing over her face as she leaned briefly against the frame. Outside, Lexington remained unchanged, quiet, slow, untouched. It made the tension inside the shop feel even sharper, like something hidden beneath a calm surface. Bishop did not follow her. That alone was enough to pull Thea's attention back. Bishop never separated from her without reason. Thea turned, stepped inside again, slower this time. Bishop had not moved far, but his focus had not broken either. Still the vat, still that exact point. "All right," Thea said under her breath. "We finish it." This time she prepared. She removed her jacket, tightened the sleeves of her shirt for better movement, scanned the room again and gathered what she could use. 2 rusted iron hooks, a broken wooden beam sturdy enough for leverage, a length of frayed rope hanging from an old support bracket. Nothing ideal, but enough. She approached the vat from a different angle, circling it slowly. Up close, the iron surface told its own story. Burn marks, layered residue, decades of use. This thing had not just been placed here. It had been worked around, anchored. Thea crouched, ran her hand once more along the base. The mortar line confirmed it. This was not structural. It was concealment. "Someone built this to be opened," she said, just not easily. Bishop shifted slightly, stepping back, giving her space now, not retreating, adjusting, like he understood what was coming next. Thea wedged one hook under the lip of the vat and tested the weight. Heavy, much heavier than it looked, close to 80 pounds, maybe more with base friction. She set the wooden beam across the edge and used it as a lever, bracing her boot against the stone floor. "On me," she muttered instinctively. Though there was no team, no unit, just her and Bishop, she pushed. The beam creaked. The iron groaned. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, just slightly, the vat shifted. Thea adjusted her grip, tightening every muscle in her arms and shoulders. Her jaw clenched, breath controlled. She pushed again, harder this time. The vat lifted, not fully, but enough to break the seal. Dust and grit fell from beneath it, the sound dry and brittle against the stone floor. Bishop stepped back further now, ears sharp, body tense. Thea did not stop. She repositioned, using both hooks now, dragging the vat inch by inch off the slab. Each movement was slow, deliberate, measured. Sweat formed along her brow, sliding down the side of her face, but she did not wipe it away. Her focus did not allow it. Minutes passed, then more. Finally, with one last controlled pull, the vat slid clear of the slab and dropped heavily onto the adjacent stone floor with a dull, echoing impact. Thea froze. Bishop froze. Silence followed. No sound from below this time. Thea stepped forward slowly, eyes fixed on what had been hidden beneath for decades. The slab was fully exposed now. A single solid piece of limestone, slightly warmer in tone, perfectly fitted into the floor, but no longer disguised. The seam was obvious now, clean and intentional. Thea knelt down, placed both hands on the edge. "Easy," she whispered. she lifted. The slab resisted at first, then gave way with a heavy scrape, revealing the darkness beneath. A square cavity, about a foot deep, stone-lined, precise, empty at first glance. Thea leaned closer, letting the light from the window fall into the space. Inside, arranged carefully on a folded piece of cloth, were objects, not scattered, not random, placed deliberately. Bishop approached slowly, nose lowering toward the opening. But he did not enter. He inhaled once, then sat back, calmer now. The tension that had filled him earlier had shifted into something else. Recognition. Thea reached in carefully, her movements controlled, almost reverent. The first object she lifted was a wooden tray holding metal molds, old, hand-shaped, each one slightly different in size. She turned one over in her hand, noticing faint engravings along the base. Names, worn but still readable, not mass-produced, custom. She set the tray aside gently and reached in again. Her fingers closed around a glass jar, sealed at the top with hardened wax. Inside was a solid block of deep golden beeswax, preserved perfectly despite the years. Thea held it up to the light. For a moment, the entire room seemed to shift in tone. The gold caught the sunlight, glowing softly, almost alive. Bishop leaned forward slightly, nose twitching, then relaxed again. Thea's chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from something unfamiliar. Connection. This was not just a hidden space. It was a message. She reached into the cavity one last time and pulled out a folded piece of paper, thick, aged, sealed with a dark circle of wax. She stared at it for a long moment, then glanced at Bishop. Bishop held her gaze, steady, certain. Thea exhaled slowly. "Yeah," she said. "We're supposed to open this." But she did not yet. Instead, she sat back on the cold stone floor, the letter resting in her hands, the jar beside her, the molds lined carefully to one side. The room felt different now, not empty, not abandoned, waiting. Thea leaned her back against the wall, eyes fixed on the sealed wax. For the first time in years, she was not thinking about where to go next. She was thinking about what had been left behind, and why it had been left for her. The letter remained unopened in her hands for a long time. The sunlight had shifted, now falling directly across her fingers, illuminating the sealed wax like something sacred rather than forgotten. The room no longer felt abandoned. It felt intentional, as if every object inside had been waiting for this exact moment. Bishop lay beside her, his large frame relaxed but present, his head resting lightly against Thea's thigh, the steady rhythm of his breathing grounding the silence. Thea turned the envelope slowly between her fingers. The paper was thick, aged but preserved, the edges slightly worn yet intact. The wax seal at the center was dark amber, pressed with a pattern that had softened over time, but still held shape. She traced it with her thumb, feeling the faint ridges. "I don't think this was meant for just anyone," she murmured. Bishop did not move, but his tail tapped once against the stone, soft and deliberate. Thea exhaled slowly and broke the seal. The wax cracked cleanly, the sound sharp in the quiet room. For a brief second, the scent rose, faint but unmistakable. Beeswax, not like the stale air of the shop. This was warmer, fuller, almost alive. Thea unfolded the letter carefully. Her hands were steady, but something inside her was not fear. Not exactly. something closer to recognition. She began to read. The handwriting was precise, slightly slanted, written by someone who had spent years doing things with patience, each letter deliberate, each word measured. The letter spoke of work, not just labor but craft. It described a life spent repeating small actions over and over until they became something lasting. It spoke of wax and heat, of timing and rhythm, of failure and correction. But beneath all that, it carried something else, a belief that what mattered most was not the product but the discipline required to create it. Thea read every line slowly, not because she had to, but because she felt like she should. The letter was signed Amelia Rose Sullivan, October 1968. The final lines were different. They were not instructions. They were a test. I'm leaving this place to someone who needs it, not someone who wants profit. Someone who needs purpose. I have hidden these things beneath the heaviest object in the room, not to protect them from time, but to ensure that only someone willing to move that weight will find them. Someone who understands effort. Someone who will not quit halfway. If you are reading this, you have already passed the first test. The work is not in the wax. It is in showing up every day when everything says quit. The jar contains the last harvest of the Blue Ridge honeybees before they disappeared in 1967, mixed with lavender and pine resin from these mountains. Light it only when you understand why you are here. The answer is not in the flame. It is in the making. Beware the man who builds monuments to run from grief. He will destroy your sanctuary to build his. Thea lowered the letter slightly, staring at the page without seeing it anymore. For years, she had carried the belief that everything she had done, every mission, every loss, had left her with nothing that mattered outside of survival. That whatever purpose had once driven her had ended somewhere far from here, buried under orders and consequences she could not undo. But this did not feel like chance. It felt like alignment. Bishop shifted slightly, lifting his head and nudging Thea's arm gently, not urgent, just enough to remind her she was not alone in the moment. Thea looked down at him, a faint smile forming for the first time since arriving in Lexington. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but real. "Guess we didn't just end up here," she said quietly. Bishop's ears flicked, his eyes steady. Thea folded the letter carefully and set it beside her. Then she reached for the jar. The glass was cool in her hand, heavier than it looked. Inside, the golden wax held its shape perfectly, untouched by time. She hesitated before opening it. Something about it felt preserved beyond purpose, but then again, so did she. Thea twisted the seal slowly, breaking it with controlled pressure. The cork released with a soft pop. The scent filled the air immediately, not strong, not overwhelming, but complete. Thea closed her eyes without meaning to. For a moment, the room changed. The cold stone, the dust, the silence, all of it softened. The scent carried something deeper than memory. Not her memory. Something older, warmer. A place that had never known violence. She exhaled slowly, opening her eyes again. Bishop leaned closer, inhaling once, then resting his head back down. Calm, content. Thea set the jar carefully beside the molds. She picked one up again, turning it over in her hand. Each one slightly different. Each one made for a purpose. Not random. Not replaceable. Just like the letter had said. Thea looked around the shop again, but this time her eyes were not searching for threats. They were measuring possibility, the space, the structure, the tools, a system, all of it waiting to be used again. She stood slowly, the stiffness in her muscles reminding her of the effort it had taken to reach this point. But it did not feel like exhaustion. It felt like the beginning of something. Bishop stood with her immediately, shaking out his coat once before stepping close to her side. Thea walked back to the vat, now resting beside the exposed slab. She placed her hand on the iron surface again, but this time it felt different, not like an obstacle, like a starting point. She glanced back at the letter, then at Bishop. "All right," she said. "We follow it." She did not mean the words on the page. She meant the idea behind them. Patience, repetition, effort. Thea looked at her hands, scarred, steady, capable of destruction once, now maybe capable of something else. She picked up one of the molds and held it up to the light. The metal caught the sun, reflecting a faint glow across the room. Bishop stepped closer, watching. Thea nodded once. "Let's see if we can build something that lasts." The letter lay open behind her, the final line still visible in the fading light. Not a command, not a promise, just a quiet certainty. The right person will know what to do next. Thea did not question it anymore. She had already started. The next morning, Thea did not start with confidence. She started with uncertainty, the kind that sat quietly in her chest, not loud enough to stop her, but present enough to remind her she was stepping into something she did not fully understand. The shop looked different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. The letter rested folded on the wooden bench, the molds arranged beside it, the open jar of wax catching the early light. Bishop was already awake, standing near the vat, watching Thea as if waiting for the next move to be called. Thea rolled her shoulders once, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from the previous day's effort. In the military, you were trained to execute with precision, to repeat drills until they became instinct. But this was different. There were no commands here, no clear objective, just a process she would have to discover, piece by piece. "All right," she said quietly, more to steady herself than anything else. "We learn." The first problem was simple. She did not have fresh wax ready to use. The jar she had found felt too important to waste, so she set it aside carefully. Instead, she searched the shop again, this time with a different focus. Not for secrets, but for tools. She found remnants of old equipment, bits of hardened wax, a rusted pot that might still hold heat, a bundle of cotton wick tangled in a drawer. Not ideal, but enough to start. Thea worked methodically, cleaning the pot, scraping out debris, testing what could still function. It was slow, frustrating, but familiar in its own way. It reminded her of field repairs, making something usable out of what was left. Bishop followed her throughout the process, occasionally stepping closer, occasionally sitting back, always watching. By midday, Thea had managed to melt a small amount of salvaged wax. The consistency was not perfect, uneven in color and thickness, but it would have to do. She found one of the smaller molds and tried to fit a wick into it. Her fingers clumsy with a task so precise, it demanded patience rather than strength. The first attempt failed almost immediately. The wax cooled too fast, forming an uneven shell. When she removed it, the candle cracked along one side. Thea stared at it for a moment, then set it aside without a word. The second attempt lasted longer, but the wick shifted. leaving the candle crooked. The third did not hold its shape at all. By the fourth, Thea exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair, frustration building under the surface. This was not like anything she had trained for. There was no opponent, no clear problem to solve, no direct line between effort and success. Bishop stood up then, walking slowly toward the discarded candles. He lowered his head, sniffed them one by one, then gently picked up the worst of them, the cracked, uneven one, and carried it back to Thea. Thea frowned. "What are you doing?" Bishop placed the candle at her feet and sat down, looking up at her with steady eyes, not judging, not questioning, just waiting. Thea let out a short breath, something between a sigh and a quiet laugh. "Yeah," she said softly. "That one's a mess." Bishop did not move. Thea crouched down, picking up the candle again. She turned it in her hands, noticing the flaws, the uneven layers, the weak structure. Then she thought back to the letter, the repetition, the layers, the idea that nothing was built all at once. She exhaled slowly. "Not done yet," she murmured. Bishop's tail moved once, a small, deliberate motion. Thea stood again, returning to the pot. This time she adjusted her approach. She slowed down, paying closer attention to the temperature, the timing. Instead of forcing the process, she followed it. She dipped the wick once, then waited, then again, and again, each layer thin, barely noticeable, but building. Minutes turned into hours. The rhythm became clearer. Not perfect, but consistent. Thea's breathing steadied with the motion, her focus narrowing to the repetition. Dip, lift, wait, repeat. Bishop settled nearby, lying on the floor, his head resting on his paws, watching without interruption. Occasionally his ears would twitch, but he remained still, as if understanding that this was something Thea had to complete on her own. By late afternoon, Thea lifted the latest candle from the mold. It was not perfect. The surface was slightly uneven, the shape not entirely straight, but it held. It did not crack. It did not collapse. She turned it in the light, studying it. Progress. Small but real. Thea set it carefully on the bench, stepping back slightly. For a moment, she just stood there, looking at something she had made. Not destroyed, not repaired, but created. Bishop stood and walked over, sniffing the candle once before sitting beside it. Thea glanced down at him, a faint smile forming again. "Still ugly," she said quietly. Bishop's tail tapped once against the floor. Thea nodded. "But it works." She leaned back against the wall, arms resting loosely at her sides, her gaze drifting across the shop, the tools, the vat, the light, the quiet. For the first time in years, the silence did not feel empty. It felt earned. Thea looked back at the candle, then at Bishop. "Tomorrow," she said, "we do it again." Bishop did not respond with movement this time. He simply stayed where he was, calm, steady, present. And Thea understood. This was not about getting it right the first time. It was about not stopping. The imperfect candle sat on the bench, solid enough to stand, flawed enough to matter. Thea did not try to fix it. She left it exactly as it was. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Thea no longer questioned. Morning light entered the shop the same way each day, sliding across the limestone walls and settling over the workbench where her hands had learned to move with less hesitation. The first imperfect candle still sat in the corner, untouched, a reminder of where she had begun, but the ones beside it had changed. Straighter, smoother, steadier. Not flawless, but consistent. That mattered more. Bishop had adapted to the routine as well, his presence woven into each part of the day, lying near the vat while Thea worked, rising when she stepped outside. Always close enough to remind her that she was not building this alone. Thea did not notice the shift at first. It came quietly, the way most real changes did. The wax melted more evenly now. The timing between dips felt natural, not forced. Her breathing aligned with the motion. Dip, lift, wait, repeat, until it stopped feeling like a task and started feeling like something closer to understanding. She was not thinking about the process anymore. She was inside it. The first time she brought a full set of candles to the local farmer's market in Lexington, she did not expect much. She had wrapped them carefully in simple paper, the edges folded cleanly, the presentation minimal but deliberate. The market itself was small, set along a quiet street lined with low wooden stalls and open tents. The air carried the scent of fresh bread, cut grass, and something sweet drifting from a nearby honey vendor. People moved slowly here, not in a rush, not distracted. Thea sat up at a small table near the end. Bishop lay beneath it, out of the way but visible. A few people glanced at the candles, kept walking. A few stopped, asked prices, bought one or two. Nothing remarkable, but not nothing either. That was when she met Elowyn Sullivan. She was in her late 70s, tall but slightly stooped with age. Her silver hair pulled into a loose bun at the back of her head. Her skin was pale and thin, lined with the kind of wrinkles that came not from hardship, but from years of careful living. She wore a long, faded blue cardigan over a simple dress, her hands steady despite the tremor that lightly touched her fingers. Elowyn stopped at Thea's table without introduction, her eyes moving slowly across the candles before settling on one. She did not touch it immediately. She studied it, evaluated it. "You made these?" she asked. Her voice carried a quiet authority, softened by patience, the kind that made people listen without realizing they were being taught. Thea nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Elowyn picked one up carefully, holding it closer to the light. Her fingers traced the surface, feeling for something more than appearance. For a long moment she said nothing. Bishop sat up slightly beneath the table, watching her calmly, his posture relaxed but attentive. Elowyn finally nodded to herself. "Not factory work," she said quietly. "You can tell by the weight." Thea did not respond. She did not need to. Elowyn looked at her then, really looked, her gaze settling on Thea's face, her posture, the way she stood slightly apart from everything around her. "You're new here," Elowyn said. "Yes." She glanced down at Bishop, then back at the candles. "These will burn clean," she added. Not a question, a statement. Thea hesitated for just a second, then nodded again. "They do." Elowyn placed the candle back down gently. "Good," she said. "People don't realize how rare that is anymore." She selected two, paid without bargaining, and left with the same quiet presence she had arrived with. No praise, no sentiment. But something in her tone stayed with Thea long after she was gone. More people came as the weeks continued. Slowly. Not in waves, but in steady intervals. Some asked questions, some did not. A few bought out of curiosity. Others came back the following week. Thea did not advertise. She did not push. She simply showed up, the same way she had learned to show up for everything else in her life. Back at the shop, the work continued. Each batch improved. Each candle held its shape longer, burned steadier. Thea began to recognize the subtle differences in the wax, adjusting temperature without measuring, relying on sight, on instinct. The process no longer resisted her. It responded. One evening, as the sun began to lower behind the distant line of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Thea stepped outside the shop and sat on the worn stone step. The air was warm, carrying the faint hum of insects and the distant rustle of leaves. Bishop settled beside her, stretching out fully. His body relaxed in a way Thea had not seen in a long time. Thea rested her arms on her knees, looking out across the quiet stretch of land. The shop behind her no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like something she had earned, not given, not found, built. She thought about the letter, about the molds, about the jar still sitting unopened on the shelf. She had not used that wax yet. She was not ready. It did not feel like something meant for practice. It felt like something meant for when the work finally matched the intention behind it. Bishop shifted slightly, his head leaning against Thea's leg. Thea glanced down, then reached out, resting her hand lightly against the dog's neck, fingers brushing through the thick fur. "We're not there yet," she said quietly, "but we're getting close." Bishop did not move, but his breathing deepened, steady and calm. Thea leaned back slightly, letting the last light of the day settle over her. For years, she had measured her life in missions completed, objectives cleared, things ended. But this was different. There was no finish line here, no final point, just continuation, layer by layer, day by day, like the candles behind her, hanging in quiet rows, waiting to be lit. Thea did not need to say anything else. She did not need to. The shop stood behind her, solid and silent. The flame, when it came, would hold. By the time October arrived, Thea had established something she had not felt in years. Not stability exactly, but rhythm. The kind that comes from showing up to the same place every day and doing the same work until it stops feeling like work and starts feeling like who you are. The shop had changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The windows were cleaner, the shelves organized, the floor swept. Candles lined the workbench in neat rows. Some for sale, some for testing. Some she kept because they reminded her of a specific lesson learned. Thea had sold enough at the farmer's market to cover basic expenses, permits, utilities, materials, not profit, not yet, but survival, which was more than she had managed in the 18 months before arriving here. Bishop had settled into his role as well, part guard dog, part therapy animal, part constant reminder that Thea was not alone, even when the silence felt heavy. People in town had started to recognize them, the quiet woman with the military bearing and the German shepherd who never left her side. Some nodded in passing, some stopped to talk. Most just watched with the curiosity reserved for newcomers in small towns where everyone knew everyone else's business. Thea kept to herself mostly, answered questions when asked, did not volunteer information, did not explain where she came from or why she was here. People seemed to respect that, or maybe they just understood that some stories were not meant to be shared until they were ready. Elowen Sullivan had become a regular presence. She visited the shop twice a week, sometimes bringing tea in a thermos, sometimes bringing nothing but her company. She would sit on the wooden bench near the window and watch Thea work, occasionally offering advice, more often just being present. Thea learned that Elowen had been a nurse for 40 years, retired now, widowed. Her husband Robert had died in a training accident at Fort Bragg in 1986. They had been married only 12 years, no children. She had lived alone ever since. Elowen spoke about him sometimes, not with sadness exactly, but with the weight of absence. The way you talk about someone who shaped your life even after they left it. Thea understood that weight. She carried 4 names, 5 if you counted the lieutenant who had not listened. She did not speak them aloud, but they were there, always there. On a cool afternoon in mid-October, Elowen arrived at the shop, carrying a worn leather journal. She set it on the workbench without ceremony. "I think it's time you saw this," she said. Thea wiped her hands on a rag, looked at the journal, then at Elowen. "What is it?" "Amelia's," Elowen said simply. "My aunt, the woman who built this place." Thea's hand stilled. She had read the letter dozens of times by now, knew the words by heart. But this was different. This was more. "She was your aunt." Elowen nodded, pulled out the bench and sat down slowly, her movements careful, deliberate. "My father's older sister," she said. "She practically raised me after my mother died, taught me everything I know about patience, about craft, about surviving loss." Thea sat down across from her. Bishop moved closer, resting his head on Thea's knee. Elowen opened the journal. The pages were yellowed, filled with precise handwriting, recipes, notes, dates, observations. "Amelia lost her husband in the war," Elowen said. "Normandy, 1944. He was a sergeant. Never made it off the beach. She was 28. They had been married 6 years. Elowen turned a page, pointed to a sketch, a simple drawing of a candle mold. "She lost her daughter 10 years later. Polio. Sarah was 8 years old. There was no vaccine yet. Nothing anyone could do." Thea's chest tightened. She did not speak, just listened. "Amelia could have stopped," Elowen continued. "Could have given up. A lot of people would have. But she didn't. She came here every day, made candles, sold them, taught people, built something that outlasted her grief." Elowen looked up, met Thea's eyes. "She told me once that the work was not about the candles. It was about proving to herself that she could still create something. That loss had not taken everything." Thea swallowed, found her voice. "Why are you telling me this?" Elowen smiled faintly. "Because I watched you for 3 weeks at that market before I said a word. I saw how you held yourself, how you looked at people like you were waiting for them to confirm what you already believed, that you didn't belong, that you weren't good enough." Thea looked away. The accuracy stung. "Amelia looked the same way," Elowen said, "for years, until she realized that belonging is not something you wait for. It's something you build, one day at a time, one candle at a time." She closed the journal, slid it across the table. "This is yours now. The recipes are coded, but you'll figure them out. You're smart enough, stubborn enough." Thea stared at the journal. "I can't." "You can," Elowen interrupted. "And you will. Because Amelia left this place for someone who needed it, not someone who wanted it. She knew the difference." Thea's hand moved to the journal. touched the worn leather. Something inside her shifted. Not hope, not yet, but something adjacent to it. "There's something else," Elowin said, her tone changing, more serious. Thea looked up. "A man named Thomas Brennan has been buying up properties in this district. He owns everything around you now. He's been trying to get this building for 5 years. The town wouldn't sell it, so he waited. Set up that $1 clause. Figured no one could make a business work in 90 days. Thea's stomach tightened. When do the 90 days end? November 14th, Elowin said. 3 weeks from now. Thea did the math. She had been here since mid-August. 70 days, almost there. But almost was not enough. What happens if I don't meet the requirement? The property reverts to the town, goes to auction. Brennan will buy it. He's already filed plans to demolish the building. Wants to put up a veteran wellness center, therapy offices, housing, community space. Thea frowned. That doesn't sound terrible. It's not, Elowin agreed. Brennan's intentions are good, but his reasons are complicated. He lost his son 3 years ago. Ethan, Marine, served in Iraq, came home broken. Brennan didn't know how to help him. Ethan took his own life in this town. Brennan's been trying to build something to make up for it ever since. Thea understood immediately. Monuments to run from grief. Just like Amelia's letter had warned. He'll take this place, Elowin said, and he'll build something that helps people. But it won't be what Amelia wanted. It won't be what you've started. Thea looked around the shop, at the candles, the tools, the space she had slowly made her own. What do I do? Elowin stood, placed a hand on Thea's shoulder. You keep working, keep building, and when the time comes, you trust that the right thing will happen. She left the journal on the table, walked to the door, paused. Amelia used to say that light doesn't fight darkness. It just refuses to go out. Remember that. Then she was gone. Thea sat alone with Bishop and the journal, and the weight of 3 weeks hanging over everything she had built. The days that followed moved faster than Thea wanted. She worked longer hours, made more candles, sold what she could, but the numbers were not adding up. Revenue was steady but small, nowhere near what would qualify as a viable business by any legal standard. Thomas Brennan appeared at the shop on a cold morning in late October. He was in his late 50s, tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who carried authority without needing to assert it. He knocked on the open door, stepped inside when Thea looked up. "Miss Carver," he said, polite, professional. "I'm Thomas Brennan. I don't think we've met officially." Thea set down the mold she was holding. Bishop stood, moved to her side. Not aggressive, just present. "I know who you are," Thea said. Brennan nodded, glanced around the shop, took in the candles, the tools, the progress. "You've done good work here," he said. "More than I expected anyone to do in such a short time." "Thank you. I'm here to make you an offer." Brennan continued. $75,000, cash. You sign over your claim to the property. Walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere easier. Thea's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested." "You should be," Brennan said, his tone still calm. "You have 2 weeks left. You're not going to meet the viability requirement. I've seen the numbers. You're barely breaking even. The town will take this property back, and I'll buy it anyway. You'll walk away with nothing." then I'll walk away with nothing." Brennan studied her for a long moment. Something in his expression softened. "You're a veteran," he said. Not a question. Thea did not answer. "So was my son," Brennan continued. "Ethan. He came back from Iraq and he couldn't find his way. I tried to help. Tried everything I knew. It wasn't enough." His voice wavered slightly, just enough to reveal the grief underneath. "I'm building something here that could have saved him. A place where veterans can get real help, real support, not just pills and paperwork, actual community." Thea's expression did not change. "Then build it somewhere else." "I can't," Brennan said. "This is the last piece. Without it, the project doesn't work. The zoning doesn't work. The funding doesn't work. Everything falls apart." "Not my problem." Brennan's jaw tightened. "You're being selfish." "Maybe," Thea said. "Or maybe I'm just not giving up the first place I felt like I could breathe in 2 years because someone else thinks they know better." Brennan stared at her, then nodded slowly. 2 weeks, he said. "After that, it's out of your hands." He left. Bishop moved closer to Thea. She rested her hand on his head, felt the steady warmth, the solid presence. "We're not done yet," she whispered. The idea came from an unexpected source. Pastor James Whitfield stopped by the shop a few days later. He was in his mid-60s, gray hair, kind eyes, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. Elowin had mentioned him before, said he ran the community church, that he had known Amelia, that he might be able to help. He arrived with no agenda, just knocked, asked if Thea needed anything. She almost said no, but something stopped her. "I don't know how to prove this place matters," she admitted. "Not in 2 weeks." Pastor James sat down on the bench, thought for a moment. "Amelia used to host a vigil here every Veterans Day," he said. "Back in the 60s, she would make candles and people would come light them. Remember the fallen. Remember each other. It was small, maybe 50 people, but it mattered." Thea looked at him. "Veterans Day is in 2 weeks. November 11th, Pastor James confirmed. 3 days before your deadline. You think I should do it again?" "I think," Pastor James said carefully, "that viable doesn't just mean profitable. It means valuable. If you can show this place serves the community, if you can show it matters to people, that might be enough." Thea's mind raced. A vigil, a gathering, candles lit in memory, in honor. It was not a business plan, but it was something. "Would people come?" she asked. Pastor James smiled. "Let me make some calls." The next 10 days were a blur. Thea worked 16-hour shifts, made hundreds of candles, used every scrap of wax she could find. Elowin helped, brought other elderly women from the church. They worked side by side, dipping, shaping, wrapping. Pastor James spread the word. Put up flyers, called veterans groups, reached out to the local VFW, the American Legion, Gold Star families. Bishop stayed close through all of it, a constant anchor in the chaos. On November 10th, the night before the vigil, Thea stood in the shop surrounded by candles, rows and rows of them, more than she had ever made, more than she thought possible. But she still had not opened the golden jar, Amelia's jar, the one with the special blend, the therapeutic wax. Elowin found her staring at it. "You're waiting for permission," Elowin said softly. Thea did not deny it. Amelia would tell you that you've already earned it, Elowen continued. She left it for someone who would understand what it meant. Not someone who would use it perfectly, just someone who would use it with intention. Thea reached for the jar, held it, felt the weight. What if I ruin it? Then you ruin it, Elowen said. But at least you tried. Thea opened the jar. The scent filled the room immediately. Beeswax, lavender, pine, something deeper, older, a memory of mountains and time and things that endured. She worked through the night, used the formula from Amelia's journal, decoded the measurements, the ratios, the timing, made 50 special candles, poured everything she had learned into each one. By dawn, they were done. Perfect, or close enough. November 11th arrived cold and clear, the kind of day where the sky looked close enough to touch. Thea loaded the candles into boxes. Bishop helped by not getting in the way. Elowen arrived with her truck. Pastor James met them in the town square. By 4 o'clock, people had started gathering. Not 50. More. 100. Then 200. Veterans from every generation. Families. Community members. People Thea had never seen before. The square had been set up with tables, candles arranged in rows, a small podium, an American flag. Thea stood off to the side, watching, overwhelmed. Bishop pressed against her leg. You did this, Elowen said quietly. You made this happen. At 4:30, as the sun began to set, a black sedan pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, approached Pastor James, spoke briefly. Pastor James's face went pale. He walked over to Thea. Brennan's lawyer is here, he said. He's got an injunction. Says you don't have a permit for a public gathering. He can shut this down. Thea's heart dropped. Can he? Legally, maybe. Depends on how the town interprets the code. The lawyer approached, middle-aged, professional, holding a folder. Miss Carver, I'm here on behalf of Thomas Brennan. This event violates Municipal Code 7-14. Public gatherings require permits filed 10 days in advance. You have not filed. I'm authorized to disperse this crowd and issue citations if you proceed. Thea stared at him, at the folder, at the people gathering behind her, at the candles she had made, at everything about to disappear. And then Elowen stepped forward. She was holding her own folder. Thicker, older, actually, Elowen said. Her voice calm but firm. You're wrong. The lawyer frowned. Excuse me. Elowen opened her folder, pulled out documents, official seals, stamps, dates. This property was designated a Virginia Historical Landmark in 1995. Registration number HL-4729. Under state preservation law, historical landmarks are permitted to host community events consistent with their original purpose without additional municipal permits. Amelia's Candleworks held annual Veterans Day vigils from 1946 to 1970. This event is a continuation of that tradition, which means it's protected. The lawyer took the documents, scanned them. His expression shifted. This changes things, he said slowly. It does, Elowen agreed. Furthermore, historical landmark status provides protection against forced sale and eminent domain proceedings, which means the 90-day clause in Miss Carver's purchase agreement is void. She owns this property outright, permanently. Thea's breath caught. What? Elowen looked at her, smiled. I filed the landmark application 60 days ago. The state approved it last week. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. This seemed appropriate. The lawyer closed his folder. I need to consult with my client. He walked away, pulled out his phone, made a call. 5 minutes later, Thomas Brennan himself arrived. He walked through the crowd, approached Thea. His expression was hard to read. "You knew about this?" he asked. "No," Thea said honestly. "I had no idea." Brennan looked at Elowin. "You've been planning this." "I've been protecting what my aunt built," Elowin said. "What Thea has continued. What this community needs." Brennan was silent for a long moment. Then he looked around at the crowd, at the candles, at the families gathering. "My son wanted this place preserved," he said quietly. "Before he died, I found his notes last month. He had done research, tried to file for landmark status himself. I ignored it, thought my plan was better." His voice broke slightly. "I was wrong." He looked at Thea. "I withdraw my claim. The property is yours. I'll fund the restoration. No strings. Consider it an apology." Thea did not know what to say, so she just nodded. Brennan walked away, got in his car, left. The crowd had grown quiet, watching, waiting. Pastor James stepped to the podium, spoke into a microphone. "We're here to remember," he said. "To honor, to light candles for those who served, those who fell, those who carry the weight still." He gestured to Thea. "These candles were made by someone who understands that weight, someone who has carried it herself. She offers them tonight, not as a memorial to the past, but as a light for those still finding their way forward." Thea began distributing candles, one by one, to veterans, to families, to anyone who wanted to hold one. She saved the special candles, the ones made from Amelia's formula, for the oldest veterans, the ones whose eyes carried distance, whose hands shook, whose presence felt both here and somewhere far away. An elderly woman in her late 80s took one, held it close, inhaled. Her eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears. Something else. "I haven't smelled this in 70 years, she whispered. "My husband brought beeswax candles home from the mountains before he shipped out. This is exactly the same." Thea's throat tightened. She just nodded. As the sun set, candles were lit, one by one, 200 flames in the growing darkness, the scent of beeswax and lavender and pine filling the cold November air. No one spoke. No one needed to. The light said everything. Thea stood with Bishop and Elowin and Pastor James, watching, holding her own candle, thinking about the name she carried, the team she lost, the weight that would never fully leave. But for the first time, it did not feel like drowning. It felt like remembering, which was different, survivable. The vigil lasted an hour. When it ended, people came to Thea, shook her hand, thanked her, said they would come back, that this mattered, that she mattered. Thea did not know how to respond, so she just accepted it. Let it settle. Let it become real. 6 months later, the shop had become something Thea had not expected. Not a business empire, not a tourist destination. Just a steady, sustainable presence. A place people came to buy candles, to talk, to sit quietly, to breathe. She had named it officially. Carver Candles. Established 2024. But she had added a subtitle. Amelia's Legacy. Established 1930. A reminder that she was continuing something. not starting from nothing. The restoration Brennan funded had been careful, respectful. New windows, reinforced beams, updated wiring. But the character remained. The limestone, the flagstone floor, the cast iron vat. Thea taught candle-making classes twice a month. Small groups, veterans mostly. Some with PTSD, some with nothing but time and a need for something to do with their hands. Bishop had become a therapy dog, certified. He sat with people who could not speak, pressed against those who shook, reminded them they were not alone. Elowin visited 3 times a week, brought tea, told stories, kept Amelia's memory alive. Pastor James stopped by when he could, offered quiet presence, asked for nothing, gave what was needed. Brennan had kept his distance, but he sent occasional donations, anonymous. Elowin told Thea about them, said it was his way of honoring Ethan. Thea accepted it. On a warm afternoon in May, Thea was working at the bench when she found it. The second letter, hidden in the lid lining of the golden jar, only visible now that the jar was empty, used, fulfilled. The paper was thin, fragile, the handwriting the same. She unfolded it carefully. Read, "Dear Inheritor, if you are reading this, you did not quit. That means you are ready. I hid these things not to make it hard, but to make it mean something. Easy gifts do not change us. Earned ones do. My husband James died still broken, but he died knowing I loved him enough to sit with that brokenness. My daughter Sarah died too young, but she died knowing joy, because I chose to live after James was gone. Your job is not to fix everyone. It is to make light and let them choose to come toward it. The jar is empty now. Good. That means you used what I left. Now leave something for the next person. Not instructions, not answers. Just proof that someone survived. Amelia Rose Sullivan, September 1970. P.S. The dog knew before you did. They always do." Thea read it 3 times, then folded it carefully, set it beside the first letter. She thought about what to leave, what would matter, what would help. Over the next week, she prepared, created a new compartment, adjacent to Amelia's, not replacing, continuing. Inside, she placed her own letter, handwritten, honest, about loss and survival and the slow work of rebuilding. Of a small jar, filled with an improved version of Amelia's formula, added rosemary from Elowin's garden, a touch of sage, her own contribution, a photograph, Thea and Bishop and Elowin and Pastor James, proof of community, of connection, her Navy EOD badge, the one she had removed from her uniform, no longer a weight, just a marker of where she had been. A folded piece of paper, 5 names written carefully: Sergeant Marcus Webb, Corporal David Lynn, Private First Class Jordan Hayes, Specialist Amanda Cross, Lieutenant Brandon Shaw. Not forgotten, not erased, just carried forward differently. She sealed the compartment with wax made from the last of Amelia's blend mixed with her own, pressed her thumb into it while it was still warm. A mark, a signature, proof. The vat sat heavy above it once more, exactly where it belonged. That evening, Thea sat outside on the stone step, Bishop beside her, the sun setting behind the mountains, the air warm and gentle. She thought about the past year, about everything that had changed. about the person she was becoming, not fixed, not healed completely, but functional, present, building. Bishop's ears perked. He stood, alert but not alarmed. Thea looked up. A young woman stood at the end of the lane, maybe 22, thin, short dark hair, wearing a Marine Corps sweatshirt, crutches under one arm. Her expression lost, uncertain. She stared at the shop, at the sign, at the light coming from inside. Bishop walked toward her slowly, stopped a few feet away, sat, waited. The woman looked at him, then at Thea. Thea stood, brushed off her jeans, walked over. "We're open," she said quietly. "If you want to come in." The woman hesitated. "I don't know what I'm looking for." "That's okay," Thea said. "Most people don't when they get here." The woman's eyes were wet. She blinked, tried to steady herself. "I just got back," she said, "from deployment. Everything feels wrong. I don't know where I'm supposed to be." Thea understood immediately, completely. "You're supposed to be here," she said, "right now. That's enough." The woman looked at the shop again, at the candles visible through the window, at Bishop sitting calmly, at Thea standing with the patience of someone who had been exactly where she was. "Coffee's terrible," Thea added, "but the work is honest, and you don't have to talk if you don't want to." The woman took a breath, nodded. "Okay." She followed Thea inside. Bishop walked beside her, close but not intrusive. Thea showed her the workbench, the molds, the wax, the simple repetitive process that had saved her own life without her realizing it until it was done. "You just dip," Thea said, "and wait, and dip again. That's it. No rush, no perfection, just showing up." The woman picked up a wick, her hands shaking slightly. Thea did not mention it, just started her own candle, set the rhythm, let the woman follow. They worked in silence, the only sound the soft drip of wax, the crackle of the heating pot, Bishop's breathing in the corner. Outside, the light faded. Inside, new candles took shape. Imperfect, uneven, real. After an hour, the woman set down her candle, looked at it, then at Thea. "Thank you," she said. "Come back tomorrow if you want," Thea said, "or next week, or whenever." "The door's open." The woman nodded, left quietly. Bishop watched her go. Thea stood alone in the shop, the candles drying, the light warm, the space solid and real in hers. She walked to the vat, placed her hand on the iron surface, felt the cold metal, the permanence. Beneath it hidden waited her gift, her message, her proof, for the next person, the one who would need it, the one who would find it, the one who would keep the light going. Because that was the work now. Not ending, not finishing, just continuing. One candle at a time, one person at a time, one day at a time. The letter had been right. The answer was not in the flame. It was in the making. Thea turned off the lights, locked the door, walked home through the quiet streets with Bishop at her side. Above the shop, a small brass plaque caught the moonlight. Newly installed. Simple. Amelia's legacy, where broken things become light. And beneath the words, carved smaller, almost hidden, established 1930. continued 2024. Not an ending, a passing, a trust kept. The shop stood silent in the darkness, waiting for morning, waiting for the next person who would push open that heavy door, waiting for the next soul who needed to learn that survival was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning of building something that lasts.